Hello and welcome to the MB Om podcast, where you will learn to master the business of yoga with guests from around the world who have experienced becoming successful yoga teachers, studio owners, and much more. Now, here's your host, Amanda Kingsmith.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the MBOM podcast. I'm Amanda and I'm your host for the episode. And on today's episode, I have an interview with Tara Koenig, who is a yoga instructor that I know from Banff, Alberta. She teaches in the Bow Valley, which is Canmore and Banff area. And she is just such an awesome girl and she's an awesome yoga teacher. And the reason why that she's on the podcast today is she's a part of the Baptiste yoga community. She's done her up to her level 3 with the Baptiste yoga teacher training, and she's become heavily involved with the Africa Yoga Project. And so she's here today to tell listeners out there about how she got into the Africa Yoga Project, what she's learned from it, how you can get involved, and lots more just having to do with this amazing way to give back to the community and to provide yoga to people who can't necessarily afford it. So without further ado, here's Tara. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It's really cool to have you here and to hear about the project that you're a part of right now. Do you want to start by telling me how you got into yoga, though?
Yeah, my very first yoga class that I can remember was in university. It was a hot studio in London, Ontario, one of the Moksha studios that my friend had been going to. And it wasn't the ideal way to get into yoga. I'd studied kinesiology, and we were learning about how if you're dehydrated, you get drunk faster. And I was like, oh, well, this is great. I'll go get really sweaty, get really dehydrated, and then I'll go out and it'll be much, much cheaper. So yeah, that's how I got into hot yoga.
Oh my God. I love that.
Yeah. So it wasn't like the ideal or the typical start to yoga. More economical way to get into yoga for me. And then I kind of dabbled here and there. I traveled for a few years, and every place I went, I would try a yoga class, but nothing seemed to stick. It wasn't until I got back in 2013, back to Canada, that I found Power Yoga Canada. My sister recommended checking out this studio, and I went, did the 30 days, and I was instantly hooked. And then from there, I wanted to get more involved. I took the assisting program, so I started assisting classes. From there, I took a 40-day program. From the 40-day program, I decided to do my teacher training. It just kind of kept evolving pretty quickly, too. I think my first class there was in November, and then I took the teacher training that August. And then it's just been a part of my life since then.
That's awesome. It sounds like you went from sort of not really I guess taking yoga seriously, it was more about this, okay, this will work well with the way my lifestyle is, and then kind of just continuously trying it until you're like, wow, I really love this.
Yeah, and it's ironic now because I don't even drink alcohol anymore, and it started as a way to drink more, not more alcohol, drink alcohol with less money. And it's funny, yoga tends to, I find that in a lot of students, it's something that you dabble with at the start. And then as it becomes more ingrained into your daily life, then your life sort of evolves around it, which is exactly the case for me.
Yeah, that's definitely the case for me too. And it seems like the more I practice yoga, the more it's yoga kind of is my lifestyle. It's not just this thing on the mat. It's yoga is off the mat for me too.
Oh, so much.
And so I know you've done your Baptiste training. Did you start with Baptiste or did you do your training in a different style of power yoga?
So Power Yoga Canada is based off of Baptiste. So the two founders, Kinley and Pauline, were our Baptiste master teachers, and they brought the practice to Canada. So essentially all of my training has been in Baptiste thus far.
Okay, that's cool. I don't know too much about, I guess, Baptiste and power yoga. So that's that's interesting to hear about. And then, so you've done actual training. You've done all the levels of the Baptiste training now, though, right?
Yeah, so I did my first training was my 200-hour with Power Yoga Canada, and then I did level 1, level 2, level 3 with Baptiste, and those are 120-hour modules, like week-long trainings.
Okay. And what interested you about doing those?
It's kind of like a vacation for me where I get to invest in myself. I love being in the trainings, and yeah, they are super intense, like 13, 14-hour days, pretty physically demanding and mentally exhausting, but I leave there always having learned something about myself, and then I come back so inspired, and I always know, like, those first few weeks when I come back from the teacher training, I'm just on fire. And it was after my level 3, I just went in October. I decided, like, yes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start fundraising seriously. I'm going to go to Kenya in March.
That's
so
so
just kind of
awesome.
like got the ball rolling.
So can you tell me a little bit about going from your teacher training to becoming a full-time yoga teacher? Like, I know you had a job for a while and then you quit that to teach, and kind of just go through that process.
Yeah, so I finished my teacher training in August. And then pretty much my partner and I decided, this was back in Ontario, that we did not want to settle in Ontario. He's from Italy, in the mountains originally. And so we literally Googled nice places to live in Alberta. And of course, Banff popped up.
Yeah.
They were like, awesome, let's give ourselves 2 weeks. We bought a car, packed everything up, and drove across to the mountains. And just haven't left. It's so freaking gorgeous here that it's hard to leave.
Yeah.
And then from there, my very first thing to do was start teaching. I was so inspired, so stoked to get going after my teacher training. That was my number one priority. So I reached out to all of the studios, was teaching with Lululemon, got involved with Camera Hot Yoga right away. She's pretty much the only one who has a Baptiste foundation within her studio, so that was a great source for me. And then I started teaching the Banff Life community classes about a month or two after I arrived, which is amazing.
Yeah, definitely.
Those Banff Life classes, they really helped me build up the Baptiste community and my teaching skills within the Valley. To supplement, I got a full-time job, which I stayed in far longer than I needed to. I was absolutely miserable there. My only saving grace was that I had classes to teach and places to go practice at. Last year in June, decided to quit that job to pursue more teaching opportunities. I felt like that full-time job, I was constantly saying no to teaching opportunities or to travel and teaching opportunities because I had this job commitment. And it wasn't until I let that go that I really opened the door for so much good in my life. And that was one of the best decisions I've done in the last year for sure.
That's amazing. And
yeah.
How many classes, like on average, were you teaching in a week when you, after you quit your job?
After I quit my job, I was definitely subbing a lot. It was a good time. It was early in the year. A lot of people were taking family or ski vacations. So I was subbing a lot. I'd say on average 8 to 10 classes a week.
Yeah. And then have you continued that since then, or have you picked up something else since then?
There's definitely, so I have a part-time job with the town of Banff now running the Banff Life programming. I'd say it, just like anything, it ebbs and flows. Some weeks, like next week, I've got 12 classes on the roster, whereas last week I taught 5.
Okay. So it's kind of never the same.
Exactly. I'm always on looking out or talking to people about new yoga opportunities or letting people know that I'm available this date should you need a sub.
I feel like that's really key if you want to get a job as a yoga teacher, is to just really let people know that you're interested.
Oh yeah, and I think that was key to me getting involved in the community like I did. There's been, I don't know, in the Bow Valley, there's probably like 500 yoga teachers here, with a population of 8,000.
Yeah.
There's a lot of us here. And I think because I was constantly telling people, like, I wear, like, all the clothing I wear pretty much says, I'm a yoga teacher. I'm stoked to do this. Letting people know. All of the advanced life programming, I'm always saying, like, come out to the yoga classes, come and try this, like, just get involved. And then I'm always putting myself out there as a yoga instructor, so that if someone has, like, oh, my family's coming to town and we might want a private yoga class. Oh, I know of someone. And then that link is put together.
Yeah, definitely.
So
I think that's key. That's awesome.
Yeah, always just presenting yourself as what you want to be, essentially.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so is your ideal sort of like lifestyle or career with yoga being a full-time yoga teacher, or do you like sort of like having your classes set at like, I don't know, 5 to 10, picking up a few subbing gigs when you can, and then having something else on the side?
Absolutely. When I first quit my job, I was like pretty set on, oh, now I'm going to be a full-time yoga instructor. But to supplement yourself enough to survive, that was about 20 classes a week. Mm-hmm. And teaching 10 classes a week is pretty much my max, or else I'll start to burn out and the quality of my classes go way down. I would rather be an effective, an inspiring part-time yoga instructor than a full-time yoga instructor who doesn't even have time to practice what she teaches because she's teaching all the time.
Yeah. I think that's awesome that you brought that up, because I feel like it is really easy if you're teaching like 20, I don't know, even 25 classes a week. Like you're so yogaed out. You don't want to practice anymore. And practicing is so important for your teaching.
And it's important to take a diverse amount of classes as well. Like if you're always practicing Ashtanga, you can get really good at Ashtanga, but you're not going to appeal or inspire the people who don't want to do Ashtanga yoga or who don't resonate with that practice. It's important as an instructor not to burn yourself out, because if you get into such a routine where your classes are so scripted that you're not even present, you're not even aware or speaking to whoever is in front of you, you're not going to leave them feeling empowered. Yeah. You're going to leave them saying, I am not coming back to that class again because I was just moving.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think it's important for yoga teachers to remember that too. Like I think when you start out, it's really important to kind of get the experience under your belt, but know where your sort of like your number in a week. I think that there's, some people like to teach 3 to 5 classes a week. Some people like the 5 to 10 range. Some people can handle more and their energy still stays high. And I think it's a really personal thing that you kind of have to discover for yourself as a teacher.
Oh, absolutely. And it's knowing like having another job on the side is almost an asset, because you can bring so much of your personal work, your personal passion, both into your yoga teaching and bring your yoga into your full-time or your part-time job as well. Like for me working with Dance Life, I get to give ambassador presentations. I get to put on volunteer programming such as Past the Night all the time. And within that, I'm always wanting to like spark this community. I want to get people involved. I want to get people active. And then from working with volunteers, I can bring those experiences into my yoga teaching. So without all that outside input, your classes aren't as enriched or as full.
Yeah, definitely.
For me, an effective yoga teacher is one who is living their yoga outside of the yoga world, outside of the studio, and then brings that into the room.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. I think that's amazing advice. If you were to give one piece of advice to yourself when you first started teaching from everything that you know now, what would that one piece of advice be?
Oh, that's a good question.
It's a hard one.
I think just stop comparing. I find that that's one thing that I still find myself in. And my friend always says comparison is the thief of joy. And it's absolutely true. Like, oh, I don't have as many people coming to my class as so-and-so teacher. Yeah. Oh, my workshop didn't run, whereas I'm sure if this person had put it on, someone would have come. Stop comparing. Like, even comparing myself to when I first started teaching. Like, why am I comparing myself to that? I should be celebrating my growth. Why should I want to be the next Aaron Evans teacher when the Bow Valley already has an Aaron Evans and needs another Tara Koenig?
Yeah. The place needs exactly what you are and not another version of a yoga teacher.
Exactly. Then it's just going to be boring.
Yeah, I love that advice. That's awesome. And so I'd love to hear more about the Africa Yoga Project. I know that I've been a part of a fundraiser that you did with making mala beads, and I saw a little video about it, which we can definitely put in the show notes for this episode for other people to check out. But can you tell me more about that program?
Yeah, so it was founded by a woman called Paige Ellison, and she's originally American. Her story is kind of outlined in that video, but a very brief summary. She was on a vacation in Kenya. She saw some acrobats and started playing around with them. She exchanged contacts with them, and then they invited her to come back over to Kenya a couple of months later and teach them yoga. What she didn't realize when she got there was she was teaching these people in slums. So in like very informal settlements. Mm-hmm. And she wanted to change this. She saw the possibility for change, for growth, especially within like the young adult population there. And she didn't know how to get it started, and that's where Baron came in. So it's essentially founded by Paige and Baron together, based out of Nairobi. They've got a really good model, which is outlined on their website, with how it's all funded. Each teacher there has a mentor, which I was a part of last year. This mentor is paying one teacher's salary. So $125 US a month pays this teacher to do all of their classes, and this covers their cost of living essentially. So they can be 100% focused on their yoga, on their teaching, on their family, and how to better themselves. They also do a lot of outreach classes. Right now there's about 300 outreach classes that they provide each week. These are free for the community. So again, these are classes within those informal settlements in the slums. These are classes in prisons, in orphanages, in Maasai villages, to basically anyone and anywhere who's willing to show up.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And so the idea of the Africa Yoga Project is to fund these people who can't afford to do a teacher training so that they can become a yoga teacher and then sort of like create their own business and offer yoga to the people in their communities.
It gives them a chance to earn a living wage. Mm-hmm. There's a big class difference in Nairobi. There's like very high class, and then there's very, very low class. This is almost like creating that middle class, these workers who are providing services to that upper class, getting paid for it, as well as offering their services to the lower class.
Okay. That's cool. I really like that model because like I love the idea of giving back to people who like have less than myself, but I also understand that like throwing money at people isn't really like helping the situation because it's not helping them to actually, I guess, get out of poverty or to create better lives for themselves. So I think it's cool that this is like giving people the opportunity to learn a skill that they can like create a business with and that they can like enriches their life, but it also enriches other people's lives around them.
Oh yeah. So their model is, like briefly summarized, Africa Yoga Project empowers young people in Kenya's urban slums through yoga innovating a replicable model that creates jobs, improves health, and develops leaders. So I think that sentence does a great job of summarizing everything it does. Like you said, yoga is not just your practice on your mat. These people are practicing yoga in every aspect of their life, especially those who have come from nothing in their background of drugs or prostitution or being so poor that you're fighting for each meal every day, to come and have a living wage by teaching and sharing yoga.
Yeah, that's really cool. Because yoga is really, as a practitioner and as a teacher, it is a really like empowering thing.
I think I couldn't even imagine being in some of those situations and just knowing that whenever I've had a bad day and it's just oh man, I just want to get on my mat and let it all go. Mm-hmm. And when you come out of Savasana, you're just man, nothing matters now. I feel so good to be in that situation and go through that process as well. I can just imagine what it's bringing to these people.
Yeah, definitely. That's really cool. It seems like an awesome project to be a part of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really, really happy to be a part of it.
When did you first hear about it? Was it at one of your trainings?
Yeah, so my very first teacher training with Power Yoga Canada, my teacher, Kinley, had been a part of AYP for a long time. She was one of the very first mentors. In the film, the YouTube link, you'll meet Margaret. And Margaret was one of the first teachers that they trained. And Margaret was Kinley's mentee. And so during that training, we had a Skype class with Margaret. And just like the class, we didn't even see her. It's just a very, what's the word when it's not a good internet connection? Scruffy call. We couldn't make out every word, but it was so powerful listening to her teach us. She couldn't even see us. We couldn't see her. We were listening to on a teeny tiny speaker, and it was one of the best practices of that entire teacher training.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And then, so obviously Baptiste is super involved in this project. Every teacher training I've been to, there's been either Africa Yoga Project teachers there helping lead, helping assist, or participating.
Okay, that's cool. And then when did you become involved with it?
Last year, I was in the mentorship program. So I was paired up with one young man, Simon, and we would Skype about once a month. What was interesting was I didn't realize that Simon was deaf. And the first call, they were like, oh, we just have to wait for the interpreter. And at first I was like, oh, I didn't really understand. So I'm sitting there on Skype talking to him. I'm like, oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me? And then muffled in the background, they're like, oh, sorry, I'm the interpreter. Just getting my headphone on. He can't hear you because he's deaf. And I was like, oh, whoa. Yeah. And then I realized, here's someone who I would feel sorry for almost in a poor country. He's deaf, already has a disability, yet he is empowering people. He can lead anyone, anywhere in a powerful yoga practice without words.
That's awesome.
And then our mentorship went on for all of 2015, and it was such a great way to get connected with someone from a completely different background, but we still had the same goals. We both wanted to be better yoga teachers. We both wanted to be Baptiste certified instructors. We both wanted to get more involved within Africa Yoga Project. So just as much as he learned from me, I was learning and I was inspired by him all the time.
What sort of things did you take from him into your teachings in Canada? One class I tried to teach without talking, and I got to maybe 2 minutes into the class. And I just realized, I am so in my head all the time when I teach, and I come with a plan quite often that I needed to let that go. Yeah. I needed to be present and see how the class unfolds naturally and organically. That's an interesting learning. Have you tried since then to do a class without any words?
I haven't. I've done a few blindfolded classes. I think you took one of the blindfolded classes.
Yeah, you did one of the ones for Lululemon staff meeting when I still worked there. And
yeah,
that was a pretty powerful experience for me. Like I encourage people now when like I teach to close their eyes and like tree or something like that. And it's funny because people won't do it because they're so concerned about falling over, which is a whole nother interesting thing as a practitioner and a teacher. But being blindfolded was like this whole other crazy thing. It was just, it's crazy how much you rely on your eyesight when you practice yoga because it's supposed to be about feeling into your body.
Yeah, exactly. And just like taking away the ability to speak or to communicate what you want to do and have to like think up, okay, how can I embody this and how can I get other people to understand what I'm speaking? And I think that would translate universally so I could step into any studio across the world without speaking their language and still be able to teach them in a class.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely a skill that I need to work on.
Yeah, I mean, that's hard though, right? Because as a teacher, I mean, more so than anything, you use your voice because if you're walking around and you're not showing what the pose looks like, you're trying to find the exact right words to describe what the students need to do so that they can do it without having to look around the room. And so it's interesting to take that away and then try to think about a different way to teach your class.
Right. Yeah, it's just, it makes you get out of like the script, your plan, and just be what yoga is all about. Just be present with the people who are in front of you.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. That's a super cool thing to take away from being a mentor with the Africa Yoga Project. And so
definitely
you provided him with his like scholarship money for each month so that he could do his teacher training. And what was that process like? Because, I mean, you live in Banff. Anyone who lives sort of in the Bow Valley knows that it's expensive to live and it's hard to make a lot of money.
So the money I was providing, he had already gone through his teacher training. I was paying his salary as a teacher, essentially.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I fundraised for that. I was teaching community classes about 3 or 4 times a month, and all of those donations would go towards paying for Simon, as well as all of my the malas that I would make. All of the proceeds to that would also go towards the fundraising. I had just quit my job when I decided to sign up as a mentor, and I was like, man, I don't even know how I'm going to pay my own rent. And here I've committed, I've signed this commitment, I've verbalized this commitment. How am I going to do it? So I decided to fundraise. And I felt that fundraising was the most effective way because not only was it just coming out of my pocket, I was spreading the word constantly about what I was doing, about what Africa Yoga Project was about, and getting other people involved with it.
Mm-hmm. Did you find that it was hard to fundraise for it? Like, has that been a challenge at all? Just for people out there who might be interested in the Africa Yoga Project but don't necessarily have the funds themselves to, like, pay somebody's tuition or pay for their training?
I've definitely had to get creative with how I fundraise. Currently, I've got a goal of raising $8,000 for my Seva Safari, and I'm looking at it right now. I'm at $28.35, so I still have a long ways to go. Simply posting online and around town has not been that successful for me. Whether it's people can't afford it, people don't want to, people aren't interested, or people forget about it. So, yeah, definitely getting creative with how I do this. We are going to start an online silent auction. So this week I've been going around asking different stores and people who can provide services within town to donate to me, and then people will bid on that.
Oh,
I've found, yeah, it's been a bit unfortunate in that people have been a little bit hesitant to donate without getting something in return. So I feel like this will bridge that gap by, yes, you are still donating and all the proceeds are going to me, but you're getting something in return.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting because I feel like there's so many like charities or charitable organizations or not-for-profits out there. And I feel like there's been sort of a shift towards this sort of like stigma or negativity or, whatever you want to call it around these things, because a lot of the times you don't know where your money's going. And I feel like there's certain element of people being hesitant to almost just give their money to things. Have you found that that's kind of do people share that with you, or do you feel like that's something that people are feeling?
I definitely get people asking, oh, so you want me to pay for your trip? Like, no, that's not the case at all. This is going towards Africa Yoga Project, going towards their outreach programs, going towards any kind of community service. Classic example, like building a school or building a playground. Mm-hmm. That requires money. You hire a contractor. You have to get the permits. You have to get the tools, et cetera, et cetera.
And so in terms of, your trip now, tell me a little bit more about that with what you're fundraising for right now.
So coming up in March is their next teacher training. So it's a 200-hour like Yoga Alliance certified teacher training based on the Baptiste methodology, but crammed into 12 days. So it's going to be a super intense program.
12 days and in order mental. For the That's crazy.
Yes. Yeah, most 200 hours are, like mine was 2 weeks. Most people's are stretched out over a month.
Yeah, mine was a month.
So in order for this to run like a well-oiled machine, you need assistance. So I'm going to be on the assisting team. Currently, I think there's about 10 other assistants as well, and 5 teachers leading the program. And this is just to make sure that everyone is where they need to be on time, ready to go. There's going to be people taking care of hydration, of health and wellness, of setting up and closing down the practice room and the inquiry sessions. Just making sure that we are 100% there for all of the participants throughout this training.
That's awesome. And so,
yeah.
So when you're like, so people interpret it as like, oh, donate this money, help me get to Africa. It's not about like paying for your flights and your stuff there. It's about you bringing this money to help out with the project once you're over there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm funding myself for my flights, my shots, I'm going to be there a couple days beforehand just to explore the area a little bit because, like I said, it's going to be such an intense program. It's not like I'm going to be staring at lions and tigers the whole time. Mm-hmm. There is a program fee involved, which I'm also fundraising for, and that just is cost of my food while I'm there, but everything else I'm paying for myself.
And then what happens with the rest of the money? Is it just to go towards like paying to have the students there?
It just goes to support the efforts of Africa Yoga Project.
Cool.
So anything, it is growing to be a big organization, and with that comes a lot of costs, such as providing the teachers for all of these outreach classes. There's the main hub is called the Shine Center in Nairobi, just keeping that building up and running so that they can provide these free classes every month. And as well as things like getting this teacher training going so that they can actually build their model, create more teachers, and spread it throughout the continent.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting because it's, everything costs money. Like even in a developing country, things cost money, even if it costs less than it does in Canada or the United States or wherever. I feel like sometimes people aren't aware of those things, or maybe they lose sight of them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and it's hard. Like money, people work hard for their money, and you want to hold on to it. And like everyone has their own financial goals or things that they're saving up for or things that they want to spend their money on. But I love it. I've got a friend who says that money is simply energy. It comes and it goes. It ebbs and it flows. And it's so true. And I think that when I think of it that way, I'm less stressed out about it because everything that I don't fundraise, I'm going to be paying for myself. And I'm like, I'm going to go broke trying to fundraise and help out.
Yeah.
And for the last couple of weeks, I was getting really depressed about it. Like, I've been saving up my savings account for 7 years now.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking like, oh, I'm just going to blow it on a service trip to Kenya. What am I doing? And then I realized, like, I can always make more money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. That's a good point. Like, you know, even if you empty your bank account for something like this, like, you know, you can return and get a job and you can continue working and saving money back up again. Like, ebb and flow is a good way to think about money for sure.
And I spent, like, I've been to those level 1, 2, and 3 in the last 3 years, and I've paid for all of that myself. So just as much as this trip is an investment in the growth of Africa Yoga Project, I know I'm going to get so many benefits from being a part of this process as well. So as well as investing in that, I'm investing in myself as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good point. What sort of stuff have you learned from being a part of like the Baptiste community and the Africa Yoga Project that's helped you with your yoga career?
Oh, I absolutely love my Baptiste community. It's spread out all throughout the world. There's always like a great number of countries represented at every training I've been to. And I've got a lot of my closest friends don't live anywhere close to me. But anytime an issue comes up, I just bring it up with them and they give me straight feedback. Mm-hmm. There's no fluff involved. There's no taking sides. It's just honest. And it's what I need to hear, even if it's not what I want to hear. And that's what I can always depend on from my Baptiste community. I've also really learned that yoga is for anybody with any body. Mm-hmm. So there's no like, oh, you have to be able to do lotus pose in order to practice this. No, Baptiste yoga can be done in a wheelchair. You can be completely paralyzed and practice Baptiste yoga. It's for children, it's for senior citizens, it's for Olympic athletes, and it's for those recovering from injuries. And that's what I love about it. It's so accessible for everyone, right from the languaging to the sequence to how the teachers hold themselves accountable when they're teaching.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's definitely this idea of how you need to look or what size you need to be to practice yoga. And I think that it's just this thing that as a yoga teacher, like, I just don't want, students to think like, oh, you have to be able to do this to like call yourself a yogi or to practice yoga. Like, you just need to show up and be there. That's all you do.
Oh, absolutely. Like, yesterday I taught a full primary series, Ashtanga. I've never taught it before. And I don't even know it myself when I practice. And one of my favorite quotes from Darren is, you have to be willing to show up and suck in order to show up and shine. It's just coming as you are, doing what you do, and just be proud of it. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter if I know the sequence or not. I just came and I had a great time. Yes, I messed things up, and I don't speak Sanskrit, and I missed some sides, but it's just yoga after all.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Some people take it so seriously.
Yeah, it's so true.
At the end of the day, it's just yoga.
Yeah, no, you can just like feel it in the room. I feel like as a teacher, when you're just like, you can tell students are frustrated with themselves and it's like, it's just a pose. Just like, let it go. It doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah.
It's a personal practice though, too. Like, I know I've had those moments too. Like, I can do a headstand completely confidently. And I wanted to do it on a bench to get a cool photo on New Year's Day when I was in Austin. And I just was so terrified that I was going to fall off this concrete bench, and I was tired and I wasn't warm and I just like couldn't get up. Like, there was fear was holding me back, and I was just beating myself up about it. And my boyfriend Ryan was like, what are you doing? Like, it doesn't even matter. And I was like, oh, you're so right. Like, it just doesn't matter. Like, and it doesn't. none of it matters. Like I don't know. That's the cool thing about yoga is it gives you that perspective on things with yoga and then things with your life as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And so for people who are interested in Africa Yoga Project, how did you get involved with becoming an assistant?
So to be a part of this assisting team, it was ideal that you've been to a Baptiste training before, just so that you know how things run. I can't say that I've been to another teacher training just to know, but just from past, all my teacher friends' experiences, it sounds like Baptiste programs are run like a show. Mm-hmm. You're expected to be at each place on time or early, ready to go no matter what. No breaks, no fluff. Yeah, I'll say. That's what I love about it. There's no fluff in this yoga. And then so long as they think that, so long as you prove that you're an ideal candidate and that you are committed to helping this program run smoothly, then you fundraise and you get yourself over there is essentially all it is.
So you just applied for it and they accept you, or I guess in some cases probably don't accept you?
Yeah, exactly. Quite often there's invitations that they'll send out saying yes, we would love for you to be a part of the team. Or I don't know anyone who wasn't accepted, but maybe assisting is not in the cards, but please come and participate in the program.
Yeah. Or maybe even if there's people who haven't done a training with Baptiste, they, encourage them to do that training and then reapply type thing.
Absolutely. And this teacher training that's running is not just for the teachers within Kenya. It's for anyone.
Oh,
again,
cool.
Adding that accessibility. And I think I've only seen videos of how these programs are interacting, but having your teacher training with such a diverse community can only add to it. Because whenever you're sharing all your issues, quite often it's, love or friendships or trust issues. All of those things are human nature. We're all the same. Mm-hmm. Oh, he cheated on me. That happens worldwide.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't trust this person anymore. I don't know how I'm going to feed my kids because of this financial crisis or this stuff going on. It all translates universally.
Yeah, that's cool. It's kind of it's a very yoga concept, but it's kind of this idea of oneness. We're kind of just all in it together.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's awesome. And so in terms of how people can support you with fundraising, what's the best way if people are interested in donating to the project?
So right now I do have a GoFundMe page up, and financial donations are essentially what I need right now. Mm-hmm. I'm at about 32% of my goal right now, and the trip, I leave on March 18th. Program starts on March 23rd. So I'd like to have my $8,000 before that date. Mm-hmm. I also, if you're in the Bow Valley, I am accepting donations for that silent auction. I'd say up until for the next 10 days or so, and then I want to get the silent auction up and running to hopefully raise, my goal for that is another $1,200 from that.
Cool.
If you have any other ideas that you want to throw out to me, I am open to all. I do have some mala necklaces and bracelets for sale at Lululemon on Banff Avenue in Banff, at Canmore Hot Yoga, and the Yoga Lounge in Canmore as well. I've avoided putting on an actual event just because I've found the cost of running an event usually outweighs what I've actually raised. I've put on a few events last year and just wasn't making anything from it. I was spending more than I was actually raising. So ideally, the GoFundMe page is my number one right now.
Cool. That's awesome to know. And I'll put a link for that in the show notes for sure, if there's anyone out there who wants to contribute to it. That's super cool that you're doing that.
I'm really, really excited. Well, equally excited and terrified at the same time. I've never been to Africa.
Yeah, no, that's pretty awesome. Have you got your yellow fever shot yet?
I actually got that when I was traveling in Southeast Asia.
Okay.
But I got all my malaria pills and all that fun stuff from the doctor yesterday.
Yeah. Have you traveled much before? Or is this sort of your first like big trip? I guess you've been to Australia and whatnot.
Yeah, no, I've traveled for about on and off for like 4.5 years after university. Mostly Asia. I was living based in Korea for a while, so Southeast Asia. My biggest trip was probably doing the Trans-Siberian. We started in Beijing, went up through Mongolia, all across Russia, and essentially ended up in the UK.
That's
after
incredible.
that. That was a really fun trip.
Yeah, definitely.
That was definitely more focused on the alcohol than the yoga, though.
It's okay. Africa will be more about the yoga than the alcohol.
Oh, absolutely.
How are you feeling about going to Africa in like a month?
Usually when I travel, it doesn't hit me until I've landed there. Even like in the plane, in the airport has kind of become routine for me. It's not until I step out of the airplane and there's like the new humidity, new smells, new just sensations going on that I realize I'm like, oh, wow, I'm in a completely different place. I'm out of my element. Bring it on.
That's awesome. I love that. That's exactly how I feel about stuff like that. So that'll be such a cool experience for you. And to combine like the passions of travel and yoga together will be amazing.
Yeah, I hope to inspire others to get involved with Africa Yoga Project as well. There's not just, so Seva Safari happens year round. Mm-hmm. I think there's about 8 Seva Safaris happening in 2016, and each one has a different theme. My friend John put on one where they went and volunteered with Africa Yoga Project, and then together with some AYP teachers, they climbed Mount Kilimanjaro.
Oh, cool.
There was one where it was a family-oriented one. So a lot of people brought their kids over, and a lot of their outreach work was done within orphanages. So if you check out the Africa Yoga Project website, they have all of their Seva Safaris up and running, and maybe you find something that really sparks your interest.
That's really cool. Yeah, I'll definitely put a link for that in the show notes too so that people can find it really easily and check that out. It's interesting because I was talking to a yoga teacher down in Atlanta, and she was saying that she had a friend who was kind of like interested in the Baptiste thing in Africa Yoga Project, and she was like, yeah, it seems like a really confusing program. And I was like, oh, I know a girl who does it. Like, do you find that there's any confusion around it or any resources that have helped you?
Their website is amazing and pretty straightforward. There's volunteer in Kenya, and then you can look at the Seva Safari, and from there it will list everything. And each Seva Safari will have its own link with what you're doing, the dates, and what your commitment is. Pretty standard for every project is the fundraising commitment of $4,000 US. And with our amazing Canadian exchange rate right now, it's more than, I think it's like 6.45 Canadian dollars, which is why I'm hoping for my goal of 8,000 just to cover that exchange rate difference.
Yeah, I guess it's an unideal time to be fundraising in Canada, hey?
Oh, everything right now.
I feel ya. Do you have anything else that you want to share about your journey as a yoga teacher or Africa Yoga Project in general?
Definitely my biggest learning, other than comparison, of course, has been to ask for help when I need it. Yoga is so much about community. And so, ask you for help to help spread the word about this. Asking people for money because I need the monetary donations right now. Asking for friends for what services can you donate to help me fundraise. Ask teachers for feedback when I feel like the class just wasn't landing in students. Mm-hmm. That getting out of my head and anticipating what people are going to say has been holding me back a lot.
Yeah.
And just asking for help. Definitely.
I think that's great advice, because I know, like, even in my personal life, we kind of create this answer that people might give us. And I feel like in my experience, people are so willing to help when you ask them.
Absolutely. I can have like full on hour-long conversations like of imaginary responses, and then almost convince myself that it's not worth asking this particular person for help because this event happened. Of course, this is all in my head, and then this snowballed, and then now this catastrophic event has happened. So why would I even ask them for help when I could simply just state, I'm going to ask this person for help, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
And go
definitely.
from there.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do the podcast with me today. It was really awesome to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
So there's the episode with Tara Koenig. If you want to learn more about the Africa Yoga Project, visit www.africayogaproject.com. And if you're interested in becoming a mentee, mentor, doing Baptiste yoga teacher training, all the links are on the show notes, and that's at www.mbomyoga.com. So definitely check that out. I would highly recommend watching the videos and just reading a bit about it to see what the entire project's about, because it's really cool that the mission is about empowering young people, empowering people who can't necessarily afford yoga to become leaders and to provide yoga to other countries in the world, in this case, specifically Africa. And if you're interested in supporting Tara and her efforts to get to Africa in March, definitely check out the GoFundMe page. The link is on the show notes. And I know that Tara will really appreciate anything that comes her way. So definitely check that out. Sign up for the newsletter on the website, www.mbomyoga.com. I'll send you a free copy of a really cool yoga book that I put together. So sign up for that and I'll send that your way. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to email at info@mbomyoga.com. And as always, thanks for listening.